All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we are starting our first keynote session. I request Mr. Vic Gaffney to please come on stage, Director of Kaveti Law. Can we all have a huge round of applause for him, ladies and gentlemen?
A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests. Thank you so much for taking the time to come here so early. And in my experience living here in India, Delhi generally doesn't start until about 10 o'clock in the morning. So the fact that we're here on time is a very big bonus and a very big blessing for all of us. So thank you so much. Before I start talking about the theme that I'm supposed to cover today, which basically is in the promotion of diversity, promotion of equity, and of course, inclusion in the educational framework. Before I start on that, I'll just give you a little bit of background on what I've been doing here in India for the last 25 years. 25 years ago, I came here as one of the very first people to bring Australian education and education concepts into India. I set up an organisation at that time to provide counselling to students that had dreams of going abroad, creating a career abroad, and possibly migrating abroad. And so in those days, that's in the mid-1990s, really America had garnered the lion's share of the market. And so Australia decided to, okay, let's have a share of the pie. In the last 25 years, I've seen enormous trajectory of growth in education, not only abroad, but also here in India, and it's very encouraging. In my experience in India, as a lecturer, as a teacher, as a counsellor, arguably one of the most encouraging signals I'm getting is more girls are getting involved in education in the higher education sector. I give lectures, for example, at GD Goenka University, and more than half the faculty seems to be females. It's very good. Education is not the domain of us males. It was in the time when I was going through my higher education, if we go back 40 years ago, thereabouts. And the change is very encouraging. It means that we're now looking at inclusivity of both genders. That's very important. One of the projects that's dear to my heart here in Delhi is a project that my wife, who's also Indian, and I launched about 20 years ago called the Ebenezer Community School Project. And we focus on providing international standards of education to children from economically challenged backgrounds, commonly known as the Juggy Jopari community. Now, these students, they're children of, if you like, Safai Karamchari, of Telawalas, simple folk, not high up in the economic strata. But these children are getting education of an international standard. We have foreign teachers coming into India and delivering education to them. We provide them computers. We give all their education in English. And it's so exciting to see that now, after 20 years delivering this work, so many students are now getting really good jobs and coming back and seeing Hotoni ma'am, who is my wife, touching her feet and saying, look, we could never have dreamt of doing this without your support and help. So when we talk about inclusivity, it's not just about gender, it's also about opportunities for the less fortunate. So that's a very exciting program that I've been involved in, but from the back end, the supporting end. My wife is the one that should take the credit for this. She has worked very hard to make that grow. When it comes to providing diversity, I come from a country where, and that's Australia, where diversity in culture is huge. I grew up in a multicultural environment. All my friends were either Germans or Dutch. There were some Italians as well, and so I grew up with different people from different cultures from my early childhood. Australia's education system is geared towards broadening the scope as much as possible to include everybody. It doesn't matter what your gender is, it doesn't matter what your background is, it doesn't matter whether you are Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Jain, Christian, your religion, your colour, it makes no difference. There is equality under the law in Australia, and it is strongly observed and strongly respected. So in terms of inclusivity, I grew up with that concept, and probably one of the most interesting things that happened in my early child development was having a child sitting next to me, a young boy, who was blind. And I was in a private education institution, a Christian education institution. The boy sitting next to me was blind. And I was fascinated how this guy could, literally his fingers would fly over the keyboard of the old typewriter. This is back in the days when we used typewriters and not keyboards like on computers. And yet, what amazed me about this was this guy was able to visualize the mistake he'd made even 10, 15 characters back, and duck, 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 he would go in reverse, correct that spot with a whiteout ink, and then keep going again. This fascinated me. So it means that even physically challenged people have the right to be there amongst us and with us, included in the education system, not marginalized, but part of the mainstream. And so that was an interesting learning experience for me when I was in my early teens, maybe 11 or 12. So I come from a background where inclusivity is part of the process of education in Australia. Bringing Australian education concepts into India has been a very exciting thing as well. The Indian government many years ago adopted more than 350 different if you like, blue-collar programs, capacity building programs, diploma programs, and so on, to help people gear themselves up for a professional work life. That has been adopted into the Indian education system, DESI-ized somewhat, but it means that where the trajectory of the study programs and the trajectory of the intent is clear, and it's starting to show, it's starting to manifest. My experience in India shows that in the educated community, so many people have such beautiful English, for example. Some of the best spoken English-speaking people I've ever met live here in India. One of whom who came to me, or maybe 20 years ago, looking for a position in my consulting firm. He had a straight 9-band IELTS. The first man I'd ever met that had a clean 9, which is 9 out of 9. You can't get better than that. Spoke beautiful English. He came from Noida. And so that really impressed me, that coming from an English-speaking country, meeting people who I tip my hat to here in India, I tip my hat to them, those who speak beautiful English. So inclusivity. Diversity. If we talk about diversity, Australia, for example, has more than 120 different nations represented as part of its culture. We have more than 45 registered languages in the country, officially gazetted languages. How does that work? In Australia, for example, for each 1 lakh or 100,000 people that belong to a particular specific community, that language then becomes gazetted as an official language. All the Australian documentation, the government documentation, gets converted into that language as well. Interpreters are hired to service that particular sector. So more than 45 languages are represented in Australia with, if you like, English as the umbrella. I think there's maybe 5 or 6 Indian languages that are also gazetted in Australia, including Hindi, Punjabi, Gujarati, Bengali, Tamil, just to name a few. And they're all officially registered in Australia as official languages of Australia. So when we talk about diversity, Australia has done a lot of work in embracing the diversity concept. We've touched on equity in terms of giving opportunities to those who are less fortunate. But equity can be a very broad spectrum approach. Equity also includes equal treatment, equal opportunities. Can we really honestly say that the opportunities here in India are meeting the expectations equally across the genders? Even abroad, people still aspire to, especially the female part of our community, aspire to breaking the so-called glass ceiling. There's a lot of work to be done here in India on that. In the education sector, arguably the backbone of education is carried by the women folk in this country. And it's very nice. You look at the chota bacha, the small children in the kindergartens. Nearly 100% of the teachers are female. So the very early nurturing that takes place, the credit goes to the females in this society. I have spent more than half my professional work life serving this country. And I'm very happy to say that it has been an enriching experience for me. And hopefully my efforts have touched many hearts and many lives in this country. Before I came to India, I was involved in several ventures, including president of Australia's largest student union for 3 years, and one of the 2 student delegates on the board of the Australian National Training Authority. So that takes me back some 35, 40 years ago. So I don't want to sort of dig up the old stuff and bore everybody with that, but just to give a little bit of perspective on some of the experiences that bring me to India, as an educationist, as a counsellor, someone who also focuses on the legal issues confronting this country. For example, my passion is constitutional law. I've studied the Indian Constitution and international law for many, many years, and I'm a partner of a law firm based in New York. I represent that law firm here in India as the South Asian director. So that's one of the many hats that I wear in this country, either as a consultant or as a professional counsellor, as an educationist, as a husband, as a father. So my links in this country are very tight and very entrenched here. So having said that, I wish to thank everyone for their support today, for their attendance today, for the contributions that we'll be looking forward to seeing. And I hope that I can also assist in some way to the contribution and be of assistance to those who require it. And of course, give a hand to everybody for your attendance. And namaskar.